The following program contains adult content and sexual themes. Viewer discretion is advised. And it contains murder. Lots and lots of murder.
You stinking bastard.
People tell me, hey, you're gonna go die and go to hell. At least I'm not grown.
Time for 911, where's your emergency?
Oh, this is Sandy. For 31 Rock, Plymouth Road.
What's the
Send the
problem?
police. Send the police.
And he goes, don't be a hero, mate. And I said, I'm not trying to be a hero, but the police are coming.
One in the chest, one in the head. Fired by Detective Sergeant Roger Rogerson.
I was branching out. That's when the cannibalism started, eating of the heart and the arm muscle.
I would have nailed Carl Williams' hands to a coffee table and just pulled it out of his backside. Carl Williams is a wobbly bottomed little cherub face little boy whose life would be.
I'd harm someone each time I'd kill someone. There'd be an enormous amount, especially at first, enormous amount of horror, guilt, remorse afterwards. But then that impulse to do it again would come back even stronger.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bloody Murder.
Buenos dias, my name is Barney Black.
And I'm Tara Saraban. We're a weekly true crime podcast focusing on some of the lesser known serial killers and murderers from Australia.
And around the globe.
The whole globe. So what will you be covering this week, Barney?
I'm going to go back to the spree killers of Australia. I'm going to go back a few months.
It's a nice coffee table book, that one. Very, very vivid pictures.
Well, remember we talked about Frank Vidovic?
Vidovic. Yeah, I do.
The
That
Queen
was
Street
Queen
Massacre.
Street Massacre.
A couple of episodes ago.
Yeah.
A few months before that, Julian Knight. I'm going to talk about him.
Hoddle Street Massacre.
That's right.
All right. Melbourne, Massacre Town.
What about you, Tara?
I'm talking about a pair of guys who met at high school. They were old school chums. They liked to get up to a bit of mischief, and then they liked to get up to a bit of rape, and then they liked to get up to a bit of murder. Not
Ugh.
very nice people. They're called the Railway Killers, and I do not personally vouch for them at all.
No. So it's been a week since we've last spoken. What have you learnt this week?
Oh, okay. Well, my friend Maritz is Dutch, and he put me onto an interesting story. A year after his wife disappeared without a trace in 1991, Richard Klinkhamer, a Dutch crime writer, presented a manuscript to his publisher, which under the circumstances seemed a little bit macabre. Do you know why this would be? No, you don't.
Well, it's after the disappearance of his wife, so I'm sure it's got something to do with that.
Ah, you're clever. You really notice the details in the sentences. Anyway, the novel was called, translated from Dutch, Wednesday Mince Day. Apparently that's a Dutch saying. Not sure what context.
Wednesday Mince Day.
Wednesday Mince Day. Friday Fig Day.
I'm the little boy to put my finger in the dike.
That was not a Dutch accent. Have you ever even heard a Dutch person?
I am so sorry, Maritz.
He probably likes it.
He's going to defriend me.
Did he actually accept your friend request?
He did.
Oh, well, that's nice for you. Anyway, the book was a grisly, detailed exploration of 7 ways in which Klinkhamer could conceivably have killed his wife, Hannah Law. In one of the scenarios set out in the book, he disposes...
He immersed her in grandma butter.
He immersed her in grandma butter and slid her down a drain. No, in one of the scenarios, he disposes of her body by pushing her flesh through a mincer and feeding it to pigeons.
The pigeons are a carb-only diet, aren't they?
Well, I thought they
crumbs,
were. I
crumbs bread.
never thought to give mince to a pigeon. But I haven't killed my wife either, so, you know. Anyway, when Hanny went missing from their place, of course, the husband was the number one suspect, because they always are. However, the police inquiries were fruitless. They questioned Klinkhamer, and he denied killing her, of course. They also searched the house, and they searched the garden with cadaver dogs, and nothing was found. However strong the authorities' suspicions, they could not actually have the murder inquiry because there was no body.
So Colonel Klinkhamer got off. He's a colonel, right?
He's not a colonel.
Hogan.
But that would make a lot of sense. No, what happened was he continued to live in the house for several years, and then he eventually moved out, and some other people moved in who decided to make alterations to the garden and get rid of the old shed. Wonder what's going to happen next. Anyway, while breaking up the concrete laid on the floor of the shed, the workmen turned up a skull buried in a piece of clay a few metres below the surface. They then went on to uncover a skeleton, which a forensic scientist quickly identified from dental records as the remains of Henny Klinkhamer. So yeah, he killed his wife, and then he wrote a book about how he might have done it. It's very shades of OJ, if I did it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was my interesting factoid for the week. What about you?
Well, just trawling through the internet, doing research, all that kind of stuff. I came across this thing called the Crying Boy Curse. Now, I know this is not normally in our canon of true crime because I'm pretty sure this isn't true.
Our canon's normally full of confetti and dead bodies.
But I find this fascinating, quite delicious even.
Ooh, delicious.
Yeah, it fascinates me. The Crying Boy painting, sometimes known as the Gypsy Boy, was a mass-produced print of a painting by Angelo Bregolin.
Hang on. So that's like one of those sort of illustration-looking paintings of like a little boy with tears running down his face.
Yes, that's right.
Why anyone would want that is beyond me.
Bregolin was a trained painter who worked in Venice after the Second World War, painting crying boys and selling them to tourists.
See, that just sounds a bit weird to me.
Bregolin produced at least 65 crying boys in his lifetime, although some estimate it was really more in the neighbourhood of 1 to 2,000, though this was mass-produced when it became popular. Apparently, Bregolin adopted this sad little street urchin by the name of Don Bonillo, and he was despised and unwanted by everyone in Madrid because it was said that fires were set to start in any home he settled in, including his parents' home, consuming them in the blaze. Ooh. Which has led some to believe that he was an arsonist or possibly even a fire genius.
Oh, he's a fire genius, fire genius.
That's when you can look at shit and it just catches on fire.
Oh, right. I thought you meant that he was just really good with it.
Yeah, no. Villagers called the boy Diablo.
The devil.
The devil. So Bregolin adopted him against the advice of the local Catholic priest.
When the priest tells you to keep away from a cute little boy, there's something really going on.
So Bregolin, he painted him and managed to capture the sad, tearful expression on his face. Some believe that the artist may have beaten the child.
Oh, what? So he might have beaten him just so he could paint him with tears.
Exactly.
Whoa, that's kind of like method art.
It's claimed that Bregolin's studio burned down after having painted the child.
Well, rightly so if he did.
And Bregolin blamed the boy for it and chased him away. And then several years later, Don Bonillo, the little boy, apparently died in a fiery car crash.
Well, surely he wouldn't have started that fire himself.
Well, no. Well, maybe he wasn't thinking properly and he was trying to set something else on fire. Look, I don't know. So this is where the curse starts. It was in 1985 that the British paper The Sun explored how there were many house fires in Yorkshire where owners...
Fine journalism in The Sun, by the way.
In Yorkshire, where the owners had at least one print of the crying boy that had burned down, and yet the painting mysteriously survived unscathed.
Hang on, so some households had more than one copy of this painting?
I would.
You would not.
This was reported by Alan Wilkinson, a fire station officer who personally logged as many as 50 crying boy fires up until that time, which dated back to 1973.
Whoa.
For this reason, no firefighter would ever allow a crying boy print in his own home. The Sun organised a massive bonfire on Halloween, 1985.
Burn the art.
Burn it. Where as many as 2,500 prints of the crying boy that had been sent in by worried homeowners were burned.
Whoa.
Other bonfires may have followed.
May have.
Now, it is also claimed that in the 80s, when the painting became popular in Brazil, Bregolin went on to a TV show and explained that all the paintings were of dead children.
Ah.
And he also admitted that he made a pact with Satan in order to sell his work and become wealthy.
I'm going to make a pact with Satan so that my creepy pictures of crying children become popular and I get all the money.
There was a hell of a lot of information about this, but none of it I could substantiate, so I think it's all bullshit.
Oh, okay. Well, it was kind of interesting bullshit.
It's a great story, though, and it'd probably make a great movie.
It would indeed make a great movie. Well, fortunately, I've never want to have a picture of a crying child on my wall, so I think I'm probably safe from that curse.
We had that picture.
Oh, did you?
Oh, absolutely.
And did your house catch fire?
No.
Where's the picture now? Does your ex have it?
Actually, I think my brother Sean has it.
Wow, I wonder if he's safe.
Oh, by the way, they did some tests on the paintings, and they found that the lacquer on it was fire retardant, and that's why they didn't burn.
Oh, right. Okay.
So there is some science here.
Did they also find that if left alone in a room, the painting would start a fire?
The eyes followed you around the room.
Yeah.
He is really creepy looking, that little boy, and you could just imagine him starting fires everywhere.
God, I actually think that the artist is the creep in this scenario, but that's just me.
No, you're probably right.
Speaking of creeps.
Yeah, let's hear about your crime.
Crimes. Alrighty. So, I'm going to introduce you to some lovely gents. John Duffy and David Mulcahy met on their first day at Haverstock High School in Chalk Farms in London in the early 1970s, and the two quickly became close friends. A classmate said he remembered John Duffy well, but had no recollection of Mulcahy, who was more average looking and had a knack for blending in. He remembered Duffy as being short with a shock of bright red hair and wandering around the school alone in an oversized coat. He also recalled him being picked on mercilessly. Redhead kids cop it in Australia too.
Ginger Nuts. There's a guy at high school I knew that everyone just called him Ginger Nuts, even the teachers. And there was another guy at high school.
The teachers did not call him Ginger Nuts.
They did call him Ginger Nuts, and there was another kid at high school and they just called him Red Knob.
Red Knob? Come home, Red Knob. Like the end of Red Dog.
Do you have any favourite ginger insults?
I didn't actually pick on the redheaded kids, but I do know a redheaded guy who told me several. My favourite was Period Head.
Oh, that's pretty solid.
That seemed pretty harsh.
No.
Red, wet the bed, mop it up with gingerbread.
Wow, that's good advice.
Well, I mean, it's quite banal, but I enjoy its simplicity.
Well, you know how when you're pregnant and they can test for dwarfism and Down syndrome
they can
and stuff
teach if you're gonna they can test if you're gonna have a ranger.
They can test if you're gonna have a ranger these days.
Oh, they cannot. But also, like, it can't be every country that picks on the gingers, because wouldn't that be most of Scotland, or is that just a cliche?
No, I think that's pretty much true. Pretty much 100% of people in Scotland have red hair.
Maybe they just hate each other, all of them. That would explain train spotting.
It would.
Hey. Oh, well, anyway, that's a redhead thing. Redhead, check. Cruelty to animals? Check. Block your pet's ears for this bit. When they were both 13, Mulcahy was caught playing a game of cricket using a hedgehog as a ball.
Oh, that's what the Wombles were based on. Hedgehogs?
Dead hedgehogs that got beaten with sticks.
Badgers or something.
Right, okay. Anyway, what a sick fuck. It's quite a well-worn path, as I'm sure the listeners know. The sick fuck who's cruel to animals and feels nothing about it, and then graduates to raping and killing people. It's kind of like in the I'm going to be a serial killer starter kit.
It really is.
So the two had shared interests in the armed forces, military manuals, and the anarchist cookbook, which actually doesn't have a lot of recipes for food. They were also into the 1970s kung fu craze and used to practice moves and different types of holds on each other, which was a good way to rehearse for their attacks. They derived a big thrill from terrorising people at night in parks by jumping out of bushes and scaring passers-by.
Ah!
Oh no, a scream during a podcast? This is going to be like the whole issue with poor Mr. Casefile, who's getting in trouble for doing voices and doing screams.
Sorry.
That's all right.
You really physically jumped back then.
Well,
you recoiled even.
Well, it was a recoiling scream. It was nicer than when Mr. Casefile did it, because everything's better when Casefile does it. Did you know that this entire podcast, the whole reason why I'm doing it is just as viral marketing for Casefile?
I think you should stop saying Casefile.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but you said it. Anyway, they terrorised people. In 1976, they were convicted of causing actual bodily harm when they shot 4 people with an air rifle for fun. So that's shades of Sick Boy from Train Spotting too, to hark
When
back
someone
there.
bends over to pick up something, you shoot him in the butt.
I'm not sure that they shot him in the butt.
Oh.
But that's a good idea.
My uncle had air rifles, right? And my brother and I used to run around his backyard shooting at each other all the time.
Did you hit each other?
Oh, absolutely.
Did it hurt?
Oh, yeah. It hurt. It wouldn't break the skin. It'd leave a bruise, though.
Okay. Well, that's not too bad. Did you kill animals with it?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, really?
No, never.
Okay, good. I was just testing. Anyway, at school, the two made a pledge to each other that no matter what happened, they wouldn't dob on each other. And this would be tested decades later. They stayed close after school ended, marrying within a year of each other and joining the workforce. Mulcahy became a plasterer and Duffy a carpenter who worked for British Rail. Tradies, mate. Anyway, the fact that he worked for British Rail for several years gave him a great knowledge of all the railway stations and the best ones to use to attack women. Thanks, British Rail. Despite seemingly having grown up and settled down, the two remained interested in the thrill they got from terrorising people. Commander Andy Murphy led the investigation into the rapes, and we're going to play a clip now of him describing how the two crossed over from like practical joking to actual assaults.
One particular weekend, John Duffy's wife was away for the weekend. Margaret was away going on a training course, and Duffy and Mulcahy discussed what it would be like to actually capture somebody, to kidnap somebody, and to rape them. There was a clear plan in mind to disorientate them, drive them through parts of London, bring them into an address, take the girl across a rooftop, drop her down through a stairwell just to disorientate, and to keep her there over a weekend. It was an intricately thought through plan. It didn't happen like that. It was a blitz attack at the end. The first few rapes were indicative of the type of rape you see on a stranger attack, where a victim walked along late at night, is grabbed and brutally assaulted. But as the rapes went on, as they became more confident, they would specifically target areas. They would drive around. During the early stages, they were still breaking into cars, and they'd stolen a copy of Michael Jackson's Thriller tape. And they would play the Thriller track over and over again to G themselves up, looking for a victim. Then when they found a victim, they would control her, they would take her away from that original grab site, they would move her away. One would stand lookout, the other would rape.
And just when I was starting to like them.
Oh, you weren't starting to like them. Way to ruin the song Thriller as well, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of the rapes, Duffy said, we used to call it hunting. We did it as a bit of a joke, a bit of a game. We would have balaclavas and knives. Raping people was fun for them. Obviously, it wasn't fun for anyone else. They restrained and raped girls as young as 14. So they weren't just hideous, violent rapists. They were also hideous, violent child rapists.
That's the worst kind.
Yeah, like these poor women. It's really, really horrible stuff. Their first recorded rape occurred in 1982 when the pair, wearing full-face balaclavas to disguise themselves, overpowered a 21-year-old woman who was walking home from a costume party near Hampstead Station in North London. She was holding a teddy bear as part of her costume.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask what costume was she wearing.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm guessing with a teddy bear, maybe Goldilocks. Who knows? They covered her mouth with tape to muffle her screams, and the two dragged her into a deserted, rat-infested shed where they blindfolded her, took her clothes off, and raped her. They then went on a 4-year rape spree where they raped at least 18 women, but law enforcement think it's probably like double that at least, because a lot of women didn't come forward after the trauma of everything. So they often hunted for lone women near quiet railway stations, which is why they were dubbed the railway rapists initially. One victim said the two of them operated like one mind with two bodies. They didn't even need to speak to each other to know what the other would do next. Another remembered them tossing a coin to decide who would rape her first. These guys, like, just fucking pricks. Duffy was aroused by rape, but Mulcahy was more aroused by the violence of threatening the victims, hurting them and scaring them. As such, the rape satisfied Duffy's urges, but not Mulcahy's, as he needed more and more violence each time to get off, and sometimes couldn't maintain an erection just from the rape alone. Prosecutor Mark Dennis said, Duffy was the serial rapist. It was his partner who had the desire to dominate and exercise power and control over life and death. Mulcahy was getting more out of this. He wanted something more than just rape. It was the taller man who enjoyed exercising power over the victims, tormenting them, humiliating them on occasions. Mulcahy was an arrogant and cruel character, playing with his victims as if the whole thing was a game, getting satisfaction and enjoyment from bullying and picking on the vulnerable. Interestingly enough, in the mid-1980s, while all this rape was going on, Mulcahy had gotten passionately into roller skating.
Roller skating?
Yeah, roller skating. Cliff Richard, Wired for Sound, Olivia Newton-John, Xanadu type roller skating.
It was a dark time.
Well, yeah, it is a dark time. It's just that detail just made me go like, it's just like the cruelty combined with the roller skating, just kind of mind-blowing paradox there. Anyway, many of the rape victims told police how Mulcahy would blame them when he couldn't maintain his erection. He'd run his knife across their lips and threatened to gouge their eyes out or slice off their nipples, and revelled like a pig in mud over the abject terror they felt. We have a short clip now of Duffy's prison psychologist, Jenny Cutler, talking about what the two of them liked so much about attacking women.
Both of them found offending very exciting, and rape took that excitement to another level. It involved all the elements that they really found very reinforcing. The chase, the working as a team, the having sort of contingencies for how they were going to operate in certain circumstances, the hunting, the outwitting of the police.
Kind of remind me of hyenas.
Yeah, big time.
Ugh.
Also, the fact that, you know, there's the two of them together, and yet they're always looking for a woman on her own. Like, fucking cowardly, horrible pricks, man. Anyway, the two were actually questioned about these series of rapes in July 1985, but the police didn't have enough evidence to really have anything on them, so they were released, and 5 months later is when they escalated to murder. Oh, they slipped through their fingers. In December 1985, 19-year-old Alison Day caught a train to Hackney Wick Station. She was on her way to see her fiancé, Paul Tidyman, and keep him company while he was working overtime at a printer's near the station. Alison was the only person to get off the train at this particular stop, and she had the worst luck imaginable because Duffy and Mulcahy were lurking at the station hunting for a potential victim and probably humming Thriller to themselves. Mulcahy grabbed her and Duffy produced a knife. The rape went just like all the others, a well-organised blitz attack. But then Mulcahy made what might have been a mistake, or might have been a deliberate way to move the assault forward by referring to John Duffy by name, by calling him John, during the attack. Now, the two had vowed never to say each other's names in front of victims. They'd also had a contingency plan should this accidentally end up happening. They would kill the girl to ensure that she couldn't give the information to the police. So, like, maybe his thirst for violence made him do that so he was justified in killing her?
Seems like a natural progression, really. It's,
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So as Alison was late to arrive, her fiancé had become anxious. When he saw another train arrive, he stopped work and ran onto the platform calling her name. Unbeknownst to him, she was already dead, raped and murdered about 300 feet away.
Yeah.
Police found her body in January 1986, face down in the adjacent River Lee, wearing her coat with the pockets full of rocks to weigh her down.
Oh, it's like a Nick Cave murder ballad song, isn't it?
Actually, it is a lot like a Nick Cave song. Her blouse had been cut into 3 pieces and used to gag and bind her, and the third piece was around her neck. It had been used as a tourniquet to strangle her. And Mulcahy was the one who strangled her. So now the railway rapists had become the railway killers. Duffy later said of the murder, David actually enjoyed it, saying it gave him power, the decision over life and death. I remember him going, it's godlike having the decision over life and death. So yeah, really exciting. In April 1986, 4 months after the first murder, the two headed to the faraway suburb of Horsley in Surrey to hunt for another victim. They spotted 15-year-old schoolgirl Margie Tamboza riding her bike to the shops to buy sweets for a trip she was meant to be going on the next day.
Oh, Margie.
Yeah, only 15. Using a trick they learnt from the anarchist cookbook, they stretched fishing line across the bike path to knock her off her bike on her way back from the shops. They're like lay in wait.
Diabolical.
Yeah. After she was raped, Mulcahy turned on her, saying she'd been looking at him and struck her across the head with a stone and she fell to the ground. Mulcahy tied the girl's belt around her neck and told Duffy, I did the other one, it's your turn to do this one. And Duffy did. He strangled her with her belt. Duffy said they both left the scene together, but Mulcahy returned later and tried to set her genitals on fire to destroy any evidence that they had left. Her badly burned body was later found in nearby woods, and her watch had stopped at 5:35 p.m., which must have been when something bad happened. Duffy confessed he had agreed to go to the area with Mulcahy after Mulcahy promised that he could go first with the victim.
Ugh.
Yeah, fucking pricks. The police officers investigating the two homicides got together and realised that there were many similarities. They linked murders with the rapes and made a list of 1,800 local sex offenders who could have been the culprits. And now Duffy was actually on this list because he was a sex offender as he'd been convicted of raping his wife after they separated in 1985.
Classy guy.
Yeah, super classy. Less than a month later, in May in 86, Duffy was arrested near North Weald Station after he'd been found carrying a knife. However, as there was no specific evidence against him, he was released, only to kill again 6 days later. He keeps slipping through their fingers.
So close.
Yeah. 29-year-old Anne Locke had been married and returned from her honeymoon only a week before she was murdered. She was still sporting a golden tan that she had gotten on her tropical getaway. Locke worked as a secretary for London Weekend Television. She'd left her bicycle in the shed at the station in Brookmans Park, Hertfordshire, and took the train to work. While cruising for victims, the pair noticed a lone woman's bike at the station and decided to stake it out so they could attack whoever owned it when she came back for it. Like, this whole story makes me think riding a bicycle is very dangerous around rapists. So Anne had left work at 8:30 p.m, but she never returned home. She was seized by the two, led down the railway tracks to a field where she was raped and murdered. Her badly decomposed body was found in June 86 in undergrowth. One of her socks was inside her mouth and the other had been tied around her jaw. An attempt was also made to burn her body. They're trying to hide evidence by either putting them in a river or burning their bodies. That's their rationale and their stupid little brains. So this case caused police to mount one of the biggest manhunts in criminal history in England. It was also the first case where the British police used psychological profiling. It was big in the US at the time, with John Douglas and the really pioneering it there, but this is the first time they used it in England. Professor David Cantor from Surrey University was called in to assist the police and use his profiling system to help pinpoint who the attackers might be. Cantor came up with a list of 17 traits that he believed the offender would display, and Duffy matched 12 of them, which is pretty high.
That's really high.
Yeah, look, one of these is particularly chilling. He said that the killer would, of course, keep a souvenir of his crimes. Now, Duffy did this. He had 33 door keys, each taken from a victim as a souvenir. So when he raped women, he would insist they give him their front door key. And that's what he collected, front door keys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you've already violated someone and now you want to make it so that they're not going to feel safe again once they actually escape you and go home. Fucking... Seriously, it's just so sadistic and cruel and just... Anyway, if I deteriorate just into a ball of noises and swearing, it will never get to the finish line and justice won't be served, so I've got to keep it in check.
Keep going.
Alrighty. When arrested... No, he's not arrested yet, but you know what? He's fucking going to be. So when police fed all of the details from that profile into their computer and programmed it to sift through their suspect database and single out suspects fitting this criteria, the computer came out with one name after they'd cross-checked the profile against their 2,000-odd suspects. And of course that name was John Duffy. When arrested, yes, Duffy was questioned about his accomplice, but he wouldn't talk. As Mulcahy was Duffy's best friend and pretty much only friend, he was taken in and questioned as well. At identity parades, Mulcahy was not picked out by victims and witnesses like Duffy was. But remember, he was always the one that blended in more.
He was the plain one, yeah.
And they, wore balaclavas and things. But back in the 1980s, the poor victims weren't behind two-way glass or something.
Oh, they had to walk right up and face them, didn't they?
They had to be in the same room.
A foot away from their faces.
Yeah, face to face.
How intimidating.
Eye to eye. Pardon?
How intimidating.
I know. No wonder so many women didn't actually come forward if this is part of the process. The bravery that would take, and also just the thoughtlessness and just, I guess, male-oriented bullshit of the police system that would think that, this was an okay way to handle that situation. Anyway, it's good that things have changed. Anyway, as Mulcahy wasn't fingered by any victims or witnesses and the DNA technology wasn't far enough along to place him at any of the scenes, he was like, oh. Duffy was convicted of 7 rapes and 2 murders. They didn't convict him for the third one because I don't think they'd actually... they'd found her body, but it had been quite decomposed and they couldn't link Duffy to her.
So, lack of evidence.
Yeah. Also, many of the victims of the rapes were too traumatised to go through with the trial. So, he wasn't charged with all of the rapes that were reported.
Wow.
It was just too horrible for them. So after Duffy was put away, and he was given several life sentences. He's put away forever, essentially. But after that, Duffy and Mulcahy never made contact with each other again. A decade later, Duffy was seeing a prison psychologist called Jenny Cutler due to having recurring nightmares. And as usually happens when you start with a new therapist, he was telling her his life story. Now, we have a clip of her saying what transpired next.
Well, I had absolutely no idea. I didn't know anything about John Duffy or his offences. It was presented to me as, sort of he urgently needed to talk to someone who was having dreams. And we got as far as his first day at secondary school when he mentioned that that's where he'd met the person that he committed his offences with. And I said, which prison is your co-defendant in? And he said, he's not in prison. So I'm starting to think, what's he telling me? He said he's never been convicted or tried.
Wow, what a moment.
Yeah, 10 years later.
Yeah, and I guess as a psychologist, she's got to break confidentiality because if he's still on the loose, the public is in imminent danger.
Yeah, I think that she also went on to say that she did mention to Duffy that if he was going to tell her these things, she would have to report them. And she did report them to the police, and they put the second investigation into action. So for the past 10 years while Duffy had been in jail, Mulcahy had continued to live as a free man and roller skate. He was married and he had 4 kids.
Well, Duffy, he didn't tell on his friend, and then his friend froze him out of his life.
Yeah, look, I don't know why they didn't speak for 10 years, but I'd say it was Mulcahy trying to distance himself so that, he wouldn't be seen as the co-conspirator in all of this. So the big reveal sparked an important question for law enforcement. If Mulcahy was the more violent one, what on earth had he been up to in those 10 years? When Alison Locke was murdered in 1987, Les Bolland was the junior detective in charge of the incident room. As Duffy hadn't been found guilty of that murder, it stayed as an unsolved case. And when Les Bolland gained seniority, he went back to the case to try and find justice for Alison. In doing this, his mind turned back to Duffy. And it's just a really short clip that we have of him saying what he was thinking.
If you read all the statements from the original Duffy case, especially from the surviving rape victims, there were 2 men involved in those, and it was the larger man of the 2, not Duffy, who was the most violent. So there was still a lot of questions to be answered, and Duffy was obviously one place to start.
Absolutely, that's a good place to start.
Yeah. So when Detective Les Bolland spoke to Duffy 10 years earlier, of course, he'd been really cagey, but he'd changed his tune since then, and he was polite and cooperative, but Bolland couldn't just assume what Duffy told him was the truth. So here's Bolland talking about how he felt about believing what Duffy was saying, essentially.
You treat all the evidence that someone like that gives you with a pinch of salt. You have to test it. You have to give the warning of, if you tell one lie and in all the evidence and there's one lie that we can disprove, all your evidence is negated.
So they just question him over and over again and make sure their story's always straight, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Commander Andy Murphy was in charge of looking into all the new claims that were brought up by Duffy about Mulcahy's involvement in the crimes, and he too, of course, couldn't be sure whether or not to trust Duffy. So this is him just saying how he was looking at this process.
Why is he doing this? What's the rationale behind it? Is there something behind it? So, we set out, and the terms of reference for the team were actually to disprove John Duffy.
And you couldn't?
And you couldn't.
What do you think his motivation, Duffy's motivation,
okay. I think
is behind it?
I think in the 10 years that he was in jail, the whole bond that he had with Mulcahy had pretty much worn off. I also think that he
got friend-zoned.
Well, they were friends to begin with, dude. They weren't lovers.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think if they were lovers, that might have calmed them down.
I don't know,
somewhat.
if you're having sex together or raping
Well, okay,
people.
one of them is standing lookout while the other one commits the rapes. They didn't do it at the same time. It's still vile, either way. Any way you play that. Anyway, many new leads were derived from what Duffy was saying. And of course, the big question was whether Mulcahy had continued to commit brutal attacks without his partner. But it turns out, though, that the police weren't able to prove that Mulcahy had done any offending on his own, which doesn't mean that he didn't do it, but they certainly weren't able to prove it. In the 80s, while they were attacking women together, there was no evidence that Mulcahy went off and did like solo rapes as well, but Duffy did. Duffy was just so into raping women that he would do it when they weren't together as well. But one school of thought on this is that although Mulcahy was dominant in pushing the degree of violence perpetrated on the women, it seems that he might have needed Duffy to be there for him to go through with the crimes. And also, Detective Bolland was saying that he thinks Duffy's arrest might have served as a bit of a wake-up call for Mulcahy to just focus on skating instead.
On roller skating.
Yeah, focus on the skating.
Well, he came very close to being caught.
Earlier, yes, but he's a real arrogant shithead, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
This is going to wind up soon, and it's going to wind up okay as it could. So when questioned by police, Mulcahy seemed to think he was immune. He'd gotten away with the rapes and murders for 10 years, and he was quite sure that he was never going to be brought to justice for it. The biggest challenge for the prosecution was to get the jury to believe the word of Duffy, because he was a convicted rapist and murderer. Not the most trustworthy dude. It would also be the first time in British history that a Category A prisoner had given evidence at a murder trial. So that's a first. In January 2001, Duffy took the stand against his former BFF as the star witness for the prosecution. Mulcahy was arrogant and cocky and sure that, of course, he'd continue to get away with it. He looked convincing at first, all cleaned up in his suit, but when he was under cross-examination, the cracks began to show, and the jury were actually laughing at the ridiculousness of his answers. Essentially, he was just saying that everything was coincidence and the DNA was planted. Because advances in DNA had actually allowed the police to link Mulcahy to one of the rapes that they'd committed in the past. And also 12 victims gave thorough testimony about the taller man and that sort of thing. In February 2001, Mulcahy was found guilty of 7 counts of rape, 5 counts of conspiracy to rape, and 3 murders.
Yay!
I know. He was given 3 life sentences. And the fact that he was finally brought to justice has brought a lot of relief to the victims who'd been terrified all those years, knowing that one of the men who brutally attacked them was still out there. And because they were wearing balaclavas and the women were blindfolded, like, that guy could be anybody.
That's right.
How horrifying is that, going around for an entire decade wondering if, like, that guy over there is the guy who raped you? Like, just unthinkable. So there were rumours that Duffy got special privileges for dobbing in his former friend, but he really didn't. In fact, Duffy's confession of guilt for all of the offences got him another 12 years in jail. So there's actually a clip now of Bolland and psychologist Jenny Cutler explaining why they think Duffy finally turned on Mulcahy.
What he said was he wanted to get them off his chest. He realised what he'd done was terrible, and he didn't want on his conscience the fact that his partner in those crimes could do it again.
He'd sort of taken a long time, but he'd almost sort of got back to the point where he was in touch with how a victim might feel. And that got stronger as we went through, and after the trial, he was even more distressed about the impact that their offences had had on the victims.
Wow.
Yeah, well, rightly so. Like,
Prick's got a conscience.
Yeah, well, he apparently grew one behind bars, but he certainly didn't have one earlier. What a relief that they finally got Mulcahy, because, fuck. Mulcahy still claims that the DNA was planted, and that, of course, he's completely innocent. Oh, and one of his roller skating buddies is all like, no, he'd never do something like that, and they, like, believe him. But neither man will ever be released from jail, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Do you know what jail they're in?
No, I don't. What, do you want to send him a fucking bunch of flowers?
I don't know. Wormwood Scrubs?
Wormwood Scrubs. Wormwood Scrubs would be too good for them.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, so that's the Railway Killers, and I'm really glad that's done, because I really don't want to think about those fucking sadistic, horrible, cruel pricks
Yeah,
anymore.
I'm sure you're glad to get those guys out of your head.
Absolutely. I mean, I know we feel this way with the cases we cover. Imagine being an actual policeman that spends years chasing these people. God, it would do your head in.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God, I don't know how they do it.
Oh, they
And
live and breathe it, you know, for like 18 hours a day.
I know.
They work them hard.
I'm incredibly appreciative and proud of those guys who can, and women, of course, who can handle that kind of pressure.
Well, the police had a lot on their plate in August 1987
Ah, yeah. Why would that be?
in Melbourne.
I think I
It
know
was
why.
it was an icy August night in 1987 in the inner Melbourne suburb of Clifton Hill. Julian Knight just took 23 minutes to shoot 7 people dead and wound 19.
Oh, that's a lot.
So, Julian Knight, what a dick. He was born in 1968, and at just 10 days old, he was adopted by Ralph and Pamela Knight. Major Ralph Knight was a career soldier who, at the time his son lost his shit, was commanding the education centre in Townsville, Queensland.
Ah, military training man.
Yes, apparently he speaks fluent Chinese.
Right. Well, he'd want to. I don't imagine that many people are usually fond of his child's work here.
No. For the first 13 years of his life, Julian was never in one place for very long. The family moved frequently, both within Australia, Laverton, Melbourne and Puckapunyal. Puckapunyal's an army base.
It doesn't sound like a real word. It sounds
not-
like somewhere the Wombles would go.
It's not a species of flying kangaroo. And they lived overseas in Hong Kong and Singapore.
Hence the speaking.
Chinese.
Yes, but
Yes.
hang on. It's Mandarin, and I don't think there is like Chinese as such. It's actually Mandarin and I can't remember the other one.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in 1980, the 12-year-old Julian was devastated when his adoptive parents split up and his father, the military man he idolised and whose approval he so desperately sought, left Julian with his adopted mother.
Was his mum bad, or he just
No, she
missed
was
his
nice.
dad?
He just missed his dad. Psychologists would later say Julian felt rejected and abandoned, and this greatly contributed to his low self-esteem.
Well, join the club, Julian.
Julian was socially inept, had no friends, and had a bad temper.
That's a good combination.
It really is. He took refuge in guns and dreams of war and battlefield heroism. He studied the rise and demise of Hitler's Third Reich and imagined himself in a last-ditch gun battle in the ruins of Berlin.
Okay, and whose side was he on in his gun battle imagination?
Yeah, I think we can guess that. In 1980, 12-year-old Julian was given his first weapon, an air rifle. And no bird or cat in his neighbourhood was ever safe again.
Jesus, so he didn't just shoot his brother and laugh?
No.
Right, okay, that's a shame.
At 14, he learned to fire an M16 rifle. At 16, he made an unsuccessful attempt to join the South African Army.
Why the South African Army?
Well, his birth mother, he got in contact with her over the years and they exchanged letters and she lived there.
Okay.
So, but the South African Army wouldn't have anything to do with him.
Well, okay, 10 points for the South African Army, eh?
I don't know if this is relevant, but between May 84 and March 85, he worked at McDonald's in Swanson Street, Melbourne.
Oh, it's relevant.
You
would have been served by him, wouldn't you?
Probably. What, like in a dance move?
Well, that, and also when you were buying some kind of gross burger drunk out of your mind after going to, like, Young and Jackson's or something on Flinders Street.
Well, Melbourne people will know what that is. In 1985, he was at Melbourne High School, and the yearbook says about him, Julian Swappo Knight, Cadet Unit Looney and Chief Political Agitator.
Right, so it wasn't really a secret that he was kind of militaristic and odd, right?
He is a bit of a dick. In 1986, he joined the Australian Army Reserves. And then in 1987, after passing 2 rounds of interviews, he was accepted into the elite Duntroon Military College in Canberra as an officer cadet. So he's about 16, I think.
I think you got to be a bit older to go to the officer training,
16.
is it? Oh, okay. That's
16, 17.
Okay.
Duntroon's screening system was critiqued after the massacre.
Yeah, rightly so.
This is what they said. Our ideal is to find responsible people with an amount of controlled aggression who can work well in a team. We definitely don't want Rambos, but sometimes the wrong person slips through the net.
Wow, Rambo was really in the zeitgeist back then.
That's what an army psychologist said at the time.
Right. It's I really prefer my spree killers with lots of guns to not be good at shooting them and not really know how.
Yeah, they kind of usually are into it. At Duntroon, he became highly skilled at handling and firing machine guns.
See, that's not going to help anyone.
And submachine guns, 9mm pistols, automatic rifles, grenade launchers, hand grenades, and anti-armour weapons.
Anti-auntie weapons?
Anti-auntie weapons. Oh, God. Did he give him some tanks as well?
Probably.
It was also said he was sullen and disagreeable, and his gung-ho carelessness in the field convinced officers that he lacked the discipline and leadership qualities.
Right, so you wouldn't want to go into field with him because he's so like stroppy and like aggro that you can't trust his decision-making process.
He claimed to be a victim of incessant bullying at Duntroon. Bullying at an army camp?
No, I've seen Full Metal Jacket. That shit's fun.
There's actually a lot of evidence to support that, actually, and he was given a pretty hard time there. But, it was probably for reasons.
Right.
In fact, I'll get to that.
Okay.
A person who knew him at the time, a person who knew him at the time, told a journalist, "Julian wasn't good enough. You wouldn't go out and die for this man. You just wouldn't trust his judgment. Julian is a wimp and a coward, and that's why he was picked on. He was scared shitless. He was always saying he wished a war would start in Australia." No. Not one of us was surprised when we found out it was Julian. He was a real sicko.
Wow, so it's just like so many people are noticing these red flags.
Yeah.
So we should get this guy more guns.
Do you want some more red flags?
Please.
Julian got drunk a lot.
Well, I mean, that's understandable.
He got into fights.
No.
Being self-centered and immature, his first reaction when contradicted was to punch people.
Oh, okay.
He big-noted himself as a crack soldier who had accomplished many brave deeds.
Butt crack soldier.
Yeah, butt crack soldier. Nice one, Tara. Nobody believed him. Men despised him and women were creeped out by him. Although he was tall and slim, he had thinning hair, a blotchy complexion, a receding chin, a big hook nose, and a pissy, wispy moustache of a teenager.
Wow, are you as turned on as I am right now?
Yeah, I'm not a
Marnie?
fan. Not clicking on that like button. In April 1986, Julian applied for a shooter's license at the Collingwood Police Station. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, so did Fitkovic from the
Frank.
Queen Street Massacre.
After a routine background check confirmed that there was no criminal conviction or mental breakdowns in his history, he was granted his license.
No.
He would register a number of guns, .22 rifles, a shotgun, and a semi-automatic rifle. The Register of Firearms Inspector Lex Newgreen would tell reporters later that Julian held those weapons lawfully. It is not unusual to have a spread of firearms like that. It's not unusual to have a spread of firearms like that. I think I might cut that bit. That was a bad idea.
That's why I said I didn't want to do it. I thought it sounded better when you did it.
At Duntroon, Julian, just 6 months into his 18-month course, started having problems. A senior cadet prodded him in the chest. Julian pushed the officer away and stormed from the scene.
Wouldn't that be enough to get him in trouble?
And ran away. He stormed from the scene without being officially dismissed.
Well, that's got to get you in trouble.
Yeah, you can't do that in the army. A few days later, another officer ordered Julian to strike him. And the idea of being able to level a charge of assault against the unliked cadet.
Well, that's stupid too, because if you've ordered him to do it and he does it and you're in the army, surely it negates the fact that he did it.
Well, that's right. It's a catch-22, isn't it?
Officer stupid.
Other cadets stepped between the two before the blow could be struck. Julian was hauled off before the company sergeant major, who accused him of disobedience. How dare you not strike your other... punch your other officer in the face. So he had his weekend leave pass revoked.
Suck it, Julian.
Yeah, confined to barracks.
Oh, I bet he would have just sat around dreaming of fighting with Hitler, right? I mean, not I mean like shoulder to shoulder, not
Shoulder
like
to shoulder.
against.
Julian ignored the order, and that weekend showed up at a Canberra nightclub with his girlfriend.
Oh.
Unfortunately for him, the sergeant major also chose to go there.
Well, I mean, it was Canberra. How many nightclubs could there possibly have been? Also, this guy has a girlfriend. Why do they always have girlfriends?
I know. Well, not for long.
Ah, good.
The officer humiliated Julian in front of his lady friend and ordered him back to the barracks. Julian then started a fight with another soldier.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
After being ejected, he returned a short time later. He then calmly approached the sergeant major and slashed him twice across the face with a pocket knife.
Oh, hang on. So did this happen before he got his gun license? When they said
no, this is after.
Oh, it's afterwards?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Julian was charged with malicious wounding and ordered to resign from the army.
Well, that's probably wise.
So this is his dream career.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to be in the army, you don't slash the face of your commanding officer.
No,
even I know that,
not.
and I haven't studied up on this.
Yeah. In July 1987, with his Duntroon days over, Julian was back in Melbourne, now living with his adoptive mother, Pamela, in Clifton Hill. He stashed all his guns under his bed. Then he tried to get back with his girlfriend, but she said, "You're nuts, and I don't want to have anything to do with you."
All right, smart move, girl.
Yeah. On Sunday, August 9, Julian, after drinking beer all day, learns that a group of acquaintances have held a party the night before, to which he hadn't been invited.
Well, who wants to invite Punchy Slashy?
Sad face. And then his much-loved Tirana V8 broke down. Apparently it was a gearbox.
Right, his car broke down.
He owed a lot of money on it, and he's in debt because of it.
Yeah.
But he couldn't sell it because the gearbox
had broken down. Look, I'm sure similar things happen to people, and they don't get all fucking shitty.
Sometimes 3 bad things will happen to you in a row in a week. I've had it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just got to,
not have a gun is
not have
probably
a gun,
good
not
start.
shoot strangers.
Yeah, just, you know what it's called? I think it's called managing your own emotions.
Yeah.
And if you can't manage your own emotions, maybe get help.
Well, you know what he did? He tried to phone his ex again.
She's not interested, buddy.
She wouldn't take his calls.
Good.
To add to his anxiety, Julian's natural mother, who was living in South Africa, had failed to respond to a letter by Julian. He was apparently disturbed by his natural mother's refusal now to communicate with him.
Maybe she was busy. Maybe it got lost in the post. I mean, it's letters.
Well, she gave him up for a reason, because he was shit.
Right, she could tell after 10 days that he was shit, so she gave him up. Oh, well, there's a theory.
Yeah. Feeling dejected, he goes to the pub.
That makes sense.
I've done that. The Royal Hotel. I've been there too, and that's around the corner in nearby Hoddle Street.
Hoddle Street, huh?
Since returning from Duntroon, Julian had developed a crush on a 29-year-old barmaid.
Oh, lucky her.
She had already rejected his multiple advances, but he thought he'd give it another crack.
No, don't you? Oh, you know what he's doing now? He's deliberately compounding all of his bad things that are happening by doing this.
Yeah,
so that
maybe.
he has a fucking excuse to go crazy.
Oh, maybe.
Well, if she's knocked him back that many times, he thinks now he's a sad sack with a shit car whose girlfriend broke up with him and he doesn't get invited to parties. Now she's going to say yes?
And let's not mention that shitty mustache he's got.
Oh, yeah. It's probably the shitty mustache that was doing it.
Julian bought a packet of John Player cigarettes and a pot of beer and sat alone. He later claimed to have scoffed 15 pots. They're 15-ounce beers, so they're not that big.
No, they're little.
But people who saw him that night put the number at 5 or 6. After an hour and a half, the barmaid left with some Irishmen.
Well, that was probably pretty smart. Now, you said earlier, though, he didn't just have his, 6 pissy little beers. He'd also been drinking all day, right?
Yeah, on and off. It was actually his mother's birthday, so he'd gone to a few events.
Oh, right. I thought you were saying it was his mother's birthday, so he went to the pub alone.
No.
That's how we celebrate my mom's birthday.
So the barmaid left with some Irishmen.
Good on her.
Would you like to come back to my gaff?
To be sure.
Julian stayed, radiating hostility for another 15 minutes. He said later it was then he decided to pay the world back.
Yeah, but the world isn't someone who did something to you. It's not the world's fault that you're a dick, Julian.
But stress, shame, and humiliation finally overwhelmed Julian. His poor, fragile little psyche shattered. What a little bitch. He went home and retrieved his weapons.
Should just go and listen to The Cure like the rest of us.
That's right. He took his 2 rifles and shotgun from under the bed and strapped on his ammunition belt. Apparently took a few knives as well. But
yeah, and also he's trained. He knows how to use this stuff. This is so dangerous.
It was 9:50 p.m. when he kneeled military style on the nature strip in Hoddle Street in Melbourne's Clifton Hill. He opened fire with a Ruger 22 semi-automatic rifle, a 12-gauge shotgun, and a 38 M14 semi-automatic rifle. Later, he would say, "I saw the police and the public as targets. The object was to take out as many of them as I could, and I didn't see them as human beings." So in the next 23 minutes, he's going to shoot dead 7 people and wound 19.
Wow.
One woman was nursing her baby in a car when she was hit and killed.
Shit. Did he get the baby?
No.
Okay, that's
Others
something.
died trying to help the wounded. Some of Julian's victims stood transfixed, rooted to the spot as a 19-year-old approached and gunned them down.
Well, it would be really hard to believe that it was actually
You'd think
real.
it was a, movie set or something, or I don't know.
Well, I guess there was a lot less spree killings in those days as well. So people, as something that is real, it would have been very hard to believe.
Absolutely. He picked off a motorcyclist who tumbled off his bike and lay sprawled in the middle of the road in a large pool of blood. He blasted a man and woman who died huddled together in the gutter. Another woman was fatally hit when she left shelter to try and drag a wounded person to safety. No. A man was killed at the wheel of his car. As authorities converged on the scene, Julian peppered ambulances and police cars, shops and buildings.
Oh, he's shooting at the ambulances who are coming to help everyone? That's super low.
He fired at a police helicopter and punctured one of its fuel tanks, forcing it to land on a nearby sports field.
Hey, movies tell me that they just explode. A movie's lying
This
to me.
This isn't Die Hard.
This isn't Rambo, Tara.
I wish it was. A number of cars, many with windscreens shattered and bodywork riddled with bullets, skidded off the road and crashed.
Wow.
People ran and hid as best they could. Julian shot as many of them as he could, firing more than 125 rounds.
Whoa.
Then, thankfully, he ran out of ammunition. He actually scurried like a rat for his life when he ran out of ammo.
Where was he trying to go?
He headed towards North Fitzroy. He was trying to go to his ex-girlfriend's house, apparently.
Oh, it's lucky for her he didn't make it,
He was easily overpowered by police. Later, when he was arrested and encased in a straitjacket, he screamed and wailed. Like a little bitch.
Like a little bitch.
Julian bragged to arresting officers that he planned to kill himself before he could be captured, but did not because he mislaid the bullets he had saved for this purpose.
A likely story.
No, he had a special bullet.
You'd think you'd keep your special bullets somewhere
Yeah.
safe, right?
That's right.
Sorry, I'm not big on believing what he says, you know.
So let me put this into perspective for you, Tara.
Please.
This is just 18 days after he got discharged from the army.
Oh, wow. That is obviously a bit of a cause and effect situation, huh?
Yeah. I wanted to see what it was like to kill someone in combat, he told police later, and I wanted to know what it was like to die in combat.
Well, if only it started with that bit.
Yeah. I performed exactly as my army superiors would have expected me to perform in a combat situation.
But it wasn't a combat situation.
In any other circumstances, I would have gotten a medal for what I did. What a dick.
No one was shooting at him. It was just him shooting at people. How can you fucking win a medal for... Actually, you probably do win a medal for that.
The father of one victim, 24-year-old Wesna Makovska, openly wept when interviewed by a reporter from The Age, and his English is a bit broken here, but I quote, "Why was my daughter shot for nothing? She was all the time wanting to help everybody. My family never made trouble in Australia, never. We vote, we are friendly to everybody. Australia is the best country in the world, but the gun laws are no good. If somebody wants to buy a shotgun, they should go to the doctor and have their brain checked. Too many criminals, too many idiots buy guns and make trouble. I gave my daughter everything I could. We worked hard for our kids, but now she is gone. I've lost my daughter for nothing."
Yeah. Wow.
It's quite moving.
It really is.
I've got a clip here.
Yeah.
Of a policewoman who showed up at the scene, and she went to help that woman that was with her baby who was shot.
Okay.
It's Collingwood 303. What's the location?
Collingwood 303, we're still at the mobile service station. A car came flying down south from the scene itself, which I intercepted, and it had one male who was driving, a child in the front seat on its mother's lap. The mother was lying down. And he's just screaming, "He's killed my wife's dead." At that stage, other police were on the scene, and it was organised that the child be removed, and they talked the male from leaving the car because he didn't want to leave his wife. The first ambulance, we organised to go straight to her.
How awful is that?
Completely.
Yeah. I've got another clip from another witness.
The driver just wanted to get back and get whoever had done it, and then I remember him seeing his baby and just going over and grabbing the baby and just sitting down on the concrete and just crying. It's the saddest thing that I've seen, and I'll never forget that part of it.
Wow. Julian pleaded guilty in the Supreme Court in October 1988 to the murders of Vesna Makovska, Robert Mitchell, Georgina Papaloniou, John Muscat, Dustin Flagjack, Keith Stanton and Tracy Skinner, and to the attempted murders of 46 other people.
Wow.
Now, you're probably wondering about a bit of motive. Why did he want to do this?
Oh, well, he's messed up, obviously. But is there more?
Well, I've got some of his police interview.
Oh,
Would you like
him
to hear
actually
that?
Talking about it? Oh,
Okay.
fuck yes.
Have you had any psychiatric treatment or examination?
No.
Do you think that you have any mental problem?
Yeah, my violent.
How do you know that?
being upset and having a few too many drinks, it's always ends up in violence. Find it hard. You can contain it to a point.
You say you're getting upset. Well, you were upset tonight before this violence started?
Yes.
About what?
I know a lot about my car, financial troubles,
Oh, for fuck's sake.
ex-girlfriends. It's what springs to mind at the moment.
What a dick.
Wow, so that car thing really is something that he says.
Yeah.
I mean, the term over-violent is an interesting one, because you'd think that violent on its own is bad enough, right? But he's over-violent.
It really is. I apologise for the low sound quality of that's all I could get. There's more to that interview. There's a bit where he talks about that he thought people were shooting back at him.
Why would he think that?
Well, maybe it was echoing, maybe it was part of his delusion. Anyway, I'll play that part of the interview.
Oh, okay.
You said before that you had this desire to kill someone in combat. Why did you suddenly decide to kill these people?
It was like one big dream.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I could have been in Beirut and I wouldn't know the difference.
And
especially when... That's another question. Did a cop have a shot at me?
I don't know.
Julian Knight insists that at one stage in his first shooting spree, someone fired back. There's no evidence that he's right. The significant thing is his reaction.
I heard that shot rang out, and because it was in a pause between shots, and I kind of thought, you know, great, now there's some fire coming back my way, and kept on going. It kind of urged me on even further, because I knew then, well, I thought then that people were going to start shooting back.
Right. Yeah. So were you happy about that?
Yeah.
Why were you happy about that?
Well, I wanted, like I said, I wanted to be in combat, see what it's like.
You think that's a little bit unnatural to have that desire?
A lot of people have told me that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty goddamn unnatural. What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, it's not something most people I know think of a lot. Also, like, there's so many fucking wars all the frickin' time. Surely he could have got himself involved in one of those. I mean, if his car didn't break down.
Yeah, if his car didn't pack in. So, November 1987, Julian stood before Justice Hampel as sentence was delivered.
Justice Hampel?
Hampel, yes.
Like, Ham is your friend?
Yeah.
Okay.
The judge said that he accepted psychiatric evidence that Julian suffered from a serious personality disorder, although he was neither medically nor legally insane. He also said, war history, battle scenes and combat became part of your fantasy world. Your fantasy life was built around heroic killing in battle situations, ending up in your victory or your own death in a so-called last man stance.
There's really nothing heroic that went down in that situation from him anyway.
He also said, the judge, the surviving victims and the community at large are understandably horrified and justifiably outraged by what you have done. There is a sense of bewilderment as to why a highly intelligent man of 19 with no criminal history could have done what you did.
Okay, well, hang on. Remember how he slashed that his commanding officer's face in the Canberra nightclub? How is that not counting against him?
That hadn't been...
because it was so soon afterwards.
It was so soon after. It hadn't gone to court. I don't think it ever did.
I guess
they were going to press charges.
Done this, there's not a lot of point pressing charges on that.
I watched a lot of his interviews, and he actually did a recreation with police a couple of days later where he went out to the scene and went through what he did.
Let me guess. He was cold as fuck.
He was as cold as ice.
Do you have that?
Yeah, have a listen to this.
Just standing here, could you indicate where you fired the shots from?
Behind that rock.
Behind this rock. Those cartridge cases there, are they related to your shooting, or
Yes.
do they appear to be? Yeah. And what were you firing at from that position?
I fired at, I think, 2 cars that went past and then the motorcyclist.
Is that the motorcycle there?
Yes.
Which way was he travelling?
Towards the city.
The motorcycle's still there when he's doing this.
Did you hit the motorcyclist?
Yes. Yeah. I hit him about here and he swerved
That's a train in the background.
Go on.
And that's where he fell.
Right next to Clifton Hill
And when he
Station.
fell, can you describe what happened when he fell?
Well, he was moaning in agony, and so I put another 2 rounds into him.
What was the purpose in doing that?
Finish him off.
Right. You mean to kill him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty chilling stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment on each murder count and 10 years jail on each attempted murder charge.
Oh, so that's like over 500 years.
Yeah, how many murder charges were there? For
I thought it
attempted
was
murder charges? 42.
46, I
46.
think it was. I just really want to quickly comment about, because it was in the other clip as well, just like how chill the Aussie cops are in interrogations and walking people through scenes. There's something kind of endearing about their demeanour.
The cops always have to do that, though.
Yeah.
They have to be really unemotional and you know.
No, but you can really sort of read between the lines with them as well. I quite enjoy seeing how they act. Like I really like interrogation footage and things like that.
Yeah.
Because it's really interesting psychologically.
I don't know how they keep
observe.
that disgust in check.
I guess they're trained. What is it? Talent and skill.
Absolutely. 27 years would have to pass before he would become eligible for parole.
Well, yeah, but he's been sentenced to over 500 years. I mean, parole should just be off the table.
Yeah, well, that's...
When I'm in charge of the world, that's
right.
going to happen.
Not long after he was sentenced in Pentridge at the end of 1988, Julian gave an interview to journalist Tess Lawrence. And this is what he said. You see, I'm not just a straight-out killer. Have you read about Son of Sam? Have you read about the McDonald's massacre?
Hang on, what's the McDonald's massacre?
40 people killed in 1981.
America?
Yeah.
40? Shit.
I'd like you to read up on them before you get back to me so you have more of an understanding so we can more thoroughly discuss this type of killing process. I'm not like these other guys in here. No way. Don't even put me in the same class.
Oh, yeah, you're fucking special, mate.
Yeah.
Real fucking special.
The police asked him if he had any regrets.
Mm-hmm.
You want to hear what he said?
Sure.
Have you got any feeling of regret over these people dying?
Yes.
What do you think about it now?
I regret that it had to be civilians, and I regret that I was captured rather than killed.
We regret that too, Julian.
Yeah, I think a lot of people regret that.
Did you want to die yourself?
Yeah.
Why didn't you then just go and commit suicide somewhere?
I'd wanted someone else to put a bullet through my head.
Suicide by cop.
Yeah, and that just fucks the cop up.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Mm-hmm.
In 1995, Julian obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree from Deakin University when he was in prison.
Right, okay.
Although he majored in strategic and defence studies, he also completed sub-majors in international relations, political studies, journalism and psychology. Since then, he has undertaken courses in information technology, hospitality,
How's hospitality going to come in handy?
engineering, horticulture, cleaning, fitness and first aid.
Oh, first aid, bit too late for that.
In May 2001, authorities searched his cell at Barwon Prison's Acacia unit, supposedly the most secure unit in Victorian prison system, and found a stash of weapons.
Oh, shit.
Including 2 blades in paperclip boxes, 1 blade in a typewriter disc container, 1 Stanley knife blade, 1 sharpened butter knife, 4 metal shivs approximately 25 centimetres long.
He has more knives than I do in my kitchen.
10 inches, that is. Also were found were numerous articles to do with the Ku Klux Klan, white power, and the racist party.
Oh.
There were articles about weapons, war magazines, and a large quantity of pornographic material. A quantity of sandpaper. Who knows why?
Was he like jerking off with sandpaper to pictures of Hitler?
Well, that's actually pretty funny because the next thing he had was a picture of Adolf Hitler.
I just assumed from the white power stuff
And
that they'd be into that.
Yeah, and cards with slogans such as "Stop the Asian Invasion," "We hate all queers," "White power," and "Dial a racist."
Dial a racist? Well, you can call them.
Sure.
Or you could just go out into the street and find one. I'm sure it wouldn't be too freaking
just
hard.
throw a rock, you'll hit one. He has committed numerous acts of violence while he's been in prison.
Well, he is over-violent.
He spends sometimes months at a time in solitary confinement.
With all his friends.
Because he's such a dick. He stabbed other inmates, fellow murderers. And there was an escape attempt foiled after he took a prison officer hostage.
Oh, shit.
So things aren't going well for his parole, are they?
I hope not, because we don't want him back out here.
As part of his punishment for these offences, Julian lost privileges.
Oh.
Cessation of chocolate rations. Immediate cessation of chocolate rations.
Less sandpaper next time.
Yeah. Which spurred him to repeatedly take the Victorian Corrective Services Department to court. Each legal bid was dismissed, of course.
Suck it.
In 2004, State Attorney General Rob Hulls began proceedings in the Victorian Supreme Court to have Julian declared a vexatious litigant.
Yeah, I heard he really likes to sue for, like, fuck all.
Yeah. Justice Philip Cummins granted the request and barred him from bringing another case for 10 years.
Ah, good.
He can still apply for material under the Freedom of Information
For what?
Act.
He can material.
He can still apply for material.
What kind of material?
Well, he did...
Like fabric? Like gingham?
No, like the names of his victims and addresses. Because he tried to write them letters of apology and they just...
They don't want your letters.
No, the prison just took them and stuff. I didn't want to go into that
wow.
too
So
much.
he's trying to find out, things
Yeah.
about, like, the families of his victims.
That's right.
Wow.
No, he's a dick.
Yeah.
In 2000 in Barwon Prison, Knight found a fellow prisoner who had hanged himself and tried to revive him. He later had 3 days taken off his sentence for his miraculous conduct.
What did he, like, so he's trying to use his education.
So
he used the first aid. Did he also bring him a latte and use his hospitality training?
Well, he got 3 days off.
3 days, what?
Off 420 years.
Well, I guess that's fair.
Knight currently resides in the maximum security Port Phillip prison in Melbourne and was eligible for parole in 2014. However, the Victorian government has drafted new legislation. Yay! Stating that Knight will never be released from prison and will only be released if he is infirm and incapacitated to the point where he no longer poses a danger to others.
Okay, so he'd have to, like, have really bad Parkinson's and not be able to hold a gun, would be what I would say.
I'd say paralysed from the neck down. I'd be okay with him coming out.
Maybe a coma. A coma forever, then he can come out. Otherwise, no.
I'm glad to get this douchebag out of my head.
Yeah. That was a pretty rough episode, actually. Those clips that you played with the people talking about what happened really kind of...
it's pretty powerful stuff, isn't
really
it?
Really powerful, yeah. It's got me feeling quite unwell. That's a service we're providing to our listeners.
Oh.
Far out.
How about an Aussie Az?
Yeah,
to clear the air?
That's why we do these, because we don't want to leave everyone feeling really, like, fucking sick and sad about the world. So, perky voice time. It's in here somewhere. So Aussie Az is where we talk about sort of crime themes, short stories, short little incidents that are quintessentially Australian in some way. So I've done one earlier that talked about, Australia's love of weed. We do have quite a few weed smokers here. When a drug dealer in the Northern Territory unexpectedly hiked up the price of weed, an unhappy customer called the police to complain. The unidentified woman dubbed the marijuana price hike as outrageous, then refused to reveal any further details out of an apparent fear of incriminating herself, and she hung up. The Northern Territory Police said that the completely offended woman's bizarre call had to top the list of unusual tips. Despite marijuana being illegal in the Northern Territory, the department decided to use the incident to pursue other dealers. If you know a drug dealer who's ripping you off, give us a call, the organisation wrote on Facebook. We'd love to help.
Yeah, there should be some kind of set price kind of structure. Maybe a union or something.
A union, drug dealers pricing union.
An ombudsman.
And the ombudsman of weed prices. I'm going to write him. Well, in this case, it would be like the ombudsman.
Ah, I see what you did there.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't very good.
No, well, I think it was fucking awesome. And now I'm going to throw this at your head.
Oh.
Well, hit you in the nipple.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bloody Murder.
Yes. Once you recover from it, please don't forget to review us on iTunes. That show made me feel so happy.
And, of course, rate and subscribe. It does really help us grow.
Yeah, it really does. Also, feel free to join our Facebook group, Bloody Murder Podcast. We have some interactions there, and we also post pictures of all the key people involved in the stories that we talk about.
We do. We've got quite a little community going there.
We do,
so,
indeed.
Yeah, we'd love you to join.
Yeah, please do. Also, you can follow us on Twitter, and that's Bloody Murder Pod.
And yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.
We will indeed. And until then, keep kicking against the pricks.
Goodbye and adios.
saying that it wasn't on, and they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997.